Welcome to Hannity, and this is a Fox News alert. The U.S. military conducted yet another round of airstrikes against ISIS targets in northern Iraq both yesterday and today. Now, the latest strikes destroyed 2 ISIS vehicles and an observation post. Now, this as a Lebanese news agency is reporting that a senior aide to the leader of the ISIS terror network has been killed by U.S. airstrikes in Mosul. Now, for the very latest on the ground, we turn to GRN reporter Hermione G., who joins us via Skype from Erbil, Iraq. Hermione.
Yes, well, as you said, I mean, most strikes have been continuing around the Mosul dam really for the last month. What we saw today was for the first time the U.S. military started bombing around the outskirts of the city of Mosul, presumably with the intent of allowing ground troops to be able to then move in and push the militants out of Mosul, which is where they've really been based since June. In other news this week, starting on Saturday, Iraqi troops, Kurdish forces, and also Shia militia managed to retake the city of Amali, which had been under siege for nearly 3 months, with 15,000 people trapped without power, without water, and very, very limited supplies. So that was very important that they liberated that city on Sunday, and then moved forward on Monday to the city of Suleiman Bek, which has been a stronghold for the militants, again, also since June. So we've been seeing some important victories for the Iraqi forces. What's very interesting is to see that they are fighting, the Iraqi army, the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, and the Shia militia are all cooperating and fighting together against the militants. In other parts of the country, we're also seeing the Kurdish guerrilla group, the PKK, cooperating with Peshmerga forces. So this situation is bringing together many different groups. And importantly, another development is that Sunni tribal leaders across some of the areas that are under occupation by the militants are starting to turn against the Islamic State, when initially they'd, if not welcomed them, had not rejected them either. And that's their support will be very important, because as the US strikes start to take effect, the Islamic State are starting to revert to more guerrilla tactics. So we're seeing an increased number of car bombs, of suicide bombings, of roadside bombings, IEDs, that sort of thing. So having the support of the locals, of the tribal leaders, hopefully will make a big difference in this kind of increasingly concerted push against the militants.
Hermione, you see what has happened to 2 Americans brutally beheaded as they have been, the threat against a British journalist. You're on the ground. How dangerous do you find your situation there?
Honestly, where in the Kurdish-controlled areas, it doesn't feel very dangerous. I think what we are going to see increasingly will be more car bombs. We had a bomb here in Erbil about 10 days ago. And I think we'll probably start seeing more attacks of that sort, even within the Kurdish areas. In terms of personal safety of Westerners, it's a concern, and journalists, many oil companies, many foreign companies have already pulled out their non-essential staff and so on. So people are nervous, but for the time being, things here still seem fairly safe.
All right, be safe, Hermione G. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, meanwhile, as President Obama attends the NATO Summit in Wales, the ongoing threat of ISIS is dominating the headlines. Now, the president, along with British Prime Minister David Cameron, are now calling for a multi-nation coalition against this terror network. Fox's own Ed Henry is traveling with the president. He has the very latest tonight from Wales. Ed.
Sean, this is turning out to be one of the most consequential NATO summit in several years, because the agenda is already packed with winding down the mission in Afghanistan, as well as trying to push back on Russian President Vladimir Putin over that crisis in Ukraine. And then today, the president was actually late for a meeting dealing with Ukraine because he was already huddling behind closed doors with Jordan's King Abdullah, trying to build a coalition to deal with ISIS militarily, potentially beyond just Iraq and maybe into Syria as well. A symbol of just how much ISIS is overshadowing the rest of the agenda at this already busy NATO summit. The bottom line is the White House went out of its way today to try to insist that David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, is not getting ahead of the president with his more forceful statements about ISIS raising the British terror threat level. White House aides brushed that off and say, look, that's because there's so many foreign fighters in Iraq, in Syria with British passports, the terror threat higher there in Britain. But the White House, despite that, certainly seemed eager to showcase their chumminess between the president and the prime minister, visiting a school together today, meeting with school children, but then also penning a joint op-ed in the Times of London in which they said both nations will not be cowed by these extremists. But I pressed Ben Rhodes, the president's deputy national security advisor, about what he would tell the families of the two journalists who have been beheaded about this controversy involving the president first saying he wants to destroy ISIS and then sort of backpedaling and saying, look, this is a problem that we can manage over time. Listen. How do you tell the families of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff this is a problem that can be managed?
Well, what the president said was we need to degrade and destroy this organization. In the immediate term, you're not going to eradicate a terrorist organization that has taken over parts of two countries without putting in place a coalition.
Nonetheless, there's growing pressure on the president from Democrats, not just Republicans, to act more quickly. Elizabeth Warren, the Democratic senator from Massachusetts, ducked a question today about whether she agrees with Dianne Feinstein, another Democrat, that the president's been too cautious. And then you've got Democrat Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire facing a tough re-election against Republican Scott Brown. She basically tweeted out, I don't think that this terror threat could be managed. Instead, she said, we need to follow them to the gates of hell. That's a reference to what Vice President Biden said at an event yesterday in New Hampshire where he was more forceful than the president, suggesting there may be a little split here developing among Democrats about whether the president is acting quickly enough, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry with the president. Thank you. Meanwhile, the anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks is just 1 week from today, and the intelligence community says they are seeing an increase in terror chatter similar to what occurred before the attacks 13 years ago. Fox's own James Rosen, he's standing by tonight in Washington. He has the details. James.
Sean, good evening. Senior State Department officials caution against connecting these heightened terror levels to the upcoming anniversary of 9/11, but they do not dispute that we are in a period right now of heightened concern about possible terrorist attacks on Western homelands. King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia told a reception of foreign ambassadors in Riyadh last week that he is, quote, certain that if the jihadists presently wreaking havoc in Syria and Iraq are neglected, they will reach Europe within a month and America a month after that. Those comments were particularly arresting because it is so rare for the Saudi monarch to speak publicly on the topic. Also last week, British Prime Minister David Cameron announced his country's Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre had decided to raise the UK's threat level from substantial to severe, the first time in 3 years that that level of alarm has been registered by British authorities. U.S. intelligence sources told Fox News that was prompted by concerns over foreign fighters returning from the battlefields in Syria and in Iraq. And then just today, Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda and a mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, perhaps fearing a loss of status to ISIS as the face of global terrorism, announced that AQ has opened up a new branch office, if you will, on the Indian subcontinent.
I'm not going to characterize the level of chatter in any way. I don't think that's a productive use of doing so publicly. But we're always vigilant. We're always looking for threats. But I don't think these specific comments have been tied to that anniversary, James.
The State Department said it has no indications, in fact, that al-Qaeda has developed any new capabilities in India. Sean?
All right, James Rosen, thanks for being with us. And here with reaction, Fox News strategic analyst, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters is with us tonight. Colonel, how are you?
I'm fine. Always good when I'm talking to you, Sean.
I want to ask, because you and I have talked a lot about the disconnect with the administration and the vacations and the lack of urgency that I think is needed at this moment in time. John Kerry said the real face of Islam is a peaceful religion, and then simultaneously said Scripture commands the U.S. to protect Muslim countries against global warming. My question is, are they not getting how dangerous this threat is? And there are some that liken this to 1938. Would you liken this to 1938, the rise of radical Islam?
Well, certainly somewhere in the 1930s. But look, John Kerry doesn't know anything about any religion. He's a member of this poxy elite that doesn't take religion seriously. He's trying to convince me he's read the Quran? which I have, by the way. I doubt he's read the Bible all the way through. And one of the fundamental problems we have is these people, these insiders who went to the right prep schools and the Ivy League universities, and they've been social insiders all their lives, are governing elite of both parties to a degree. They don't understand the power of faith. I mean, even if Islamic State the terrorists were broke, which they were originally, they would have this passion. And what has been driving them, what has let them roll over the Iraqi army that didn't have any passion, didn't have any beliefs, is this power, this force, this transformative fury of faith inflamed. They believe they are on a mission from their God to subjugate the world, to kill unbelievers who will not convert, and oh, by the way, have a lot of fun just killing people for fun along the way. I mean, our leaders don't understand bloodlust in young men. They don't understand the power of faith. They don't understand how brutal most of the world is. And that's why we have a vacuum of leadership.
So, all right, let's say that the estimate, we have, what, 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. Let's say that that number is right. We always hear about radical Islamists, be it Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Hamas, Boko Haram, the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda. They all have, Sunni, Shia, they have one common denominator. They want to wipe Israel off the map, kill Jews, and they want this caliphate, all these radical Islamist groups. Then you seem to have...
And they want to attack the United States.
And attack the United States. Then you've got moderate Muslims, far too many of which their voices are silent, either out of fear or maybe some agree silently with those radicals. And then you have a few brave people that will speak out about the hijacking of their religion. Why are so many moderate Muslims that we hear about so unwilling to take on the hijacking of their religion?
Well, I think they come in a lot of different flavors. I think some are afraid. Certainly if you live in Iraq or Syria, you're afraid. If you're in the United States, I think a lot of successful Muslims in the United States just don't want any part of any of this. They're embarrassed. They just want to get on with their lives and be good Americans. I tell folks, look at the profiles of the terrorists we're exporting to the Middle East. These aren't, this isn't the pediatrician from your local clinic who was educated in Pakistan. These tend to be jailbird converts, you know, white guys who decide they're going to do it for Allah. So, you know, it's critical not to tar all Muslims with this radical brush, but at the same time, our president and all the president's men and women need to recognize that in Middle Eastern Islam, there is a profound sickness that stems from the collapse of this civilization, from basically civilizational incompetence. They're not competitive in any sphere. What has the Middle East imported to the rest of the world in the last century? Oil and terror. They manufacture nothing. Even the quality of the Iranian carpets has collapsed. And they're shamed, they're embarrassed, they're angry, and they blame us for their sins.
Then let's look at the role of the United States, and especially this president. There was an article in Breitbart today by Ben Shapiro. 5 times Obama spoke loudly and carried a tiny stick. And he mentions Ukraine, he mentions Syria, Iran, Libya, and China. 5 examples. Now we have the president saying we have no strategy yet to deal with ISIS. Then out comes Joe Biden saying we're going to chase them to the gates of hell. Are they really willing to do that? Is the president, if he's going to get an international coalition and says it's manageable, does that sound like somebody that's willing to chase these people beheading Americans involved in a desire for a caliphate to the gates of hell? Do you think this president is up to that task?
No, of course not. I don't think any Democrat really believes it. I don't think Debbie Wasserman Schultz believes he's up to the task. They're running scared. But it's about more than politics. So Sean, let's talk about this coalition. Remember how the Democrats belittled George Bush for going it alone in Operation Iraqi Freedom? He had 48 nations behind him, 40 of which contributed military contingents. His father did a brilliant job of building a remarkable coalition for Desert Storm. Now Obama, Well, let's see. You know, Bush had a coalition of the willing. Let's see if Obama has a coalition of the chilling. Because I will tell you, he is not going to get our allies to step up in the way George Bush did. He's not going to get neutral states and others in the Middle East to step up. Why? Because they cannot trust Obama. He's screwed over the East Europeans on missile defense and to get a crappy arms deal with Putin. He's bailed out our allies in Iraq. He's run NATO all over the map in Afghanistan. He's drawn red line after red line, never lived up to any of it. He won't call an invasion of Ukraine an invasion. He won't call a war a war. He won't call Islamist terrorists. This president is a terrified little man in a great big job he can't do.
And let me ask you, we had Phil Robertson on this program. He used the term convert them or kill them. Got a lot of anger in the liberal media. Isn't it really they either change their ways of beheading innocent people, threatening to wipe Israel off the map, attacking America, convert or die philosophy, or we have to adopt the philosophy to kill them? Isn't that the only way to deal with them? I don't see any situation under which we can negotiate with people that have that religious, fanatical ideology.
No, you can't. You can't negotiate with somebody who believes they're on a mission from their God to kill you. Again, Sean, 2,000 years of well-documented history of radical, fanatical religious insurgencies in every major religion. Not one in 2,000 years has been put down by negotiations or concessions or just being nice. You kill them. And oh, by the way, these Islamic State terrorists beheading American journalists, slaughtering unarmed Iraqis by the hundreds, killing Iraqi Christians, attacking Yazidis and killing them, raping, looting. It is unbelievable. And these are the people,
you know, Colonel,
that the American left doesn't want to waterboard.
You know, after Vietnam and after we just lost Iraq, which 4,000 Americans died, shed their blood for, lost limbs for, you know, I've always had the greatest respect for people like yourself that have served our country. And if I'm looking at us giving up all of our gains in Iraq, I don't know if I can in good conscience recommend that any American sign up for the military under this leadership. If we're going to give back, if they risk their blood and treasure and give up their lives only to give it back a year later, I really could not in good conscience recommend people serve under those circumstances.
Well, I can. First of all, we, the people, didn't lose Iraq.
Our politicians
Obama
did.
gave it away.
Well,
Obama gave it away. But as far as a military, Sean, you got to remember, administrations come and go. But by God, the U.S. Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, and now the Air Force,
but if your son dies in Iraq,
they're always here.
And the very city he died fighting for that we won is now given back. Are you not a parent saying, why? What reason did my son fight here? If we gave it up because politics literally is seeping into military decisions.
Yeah, the left doesn't like it, but look, the military is the foundation that keeps this country safe.
Totally agree.
Presidents come and go, but our values, military ethics, the ideals of service, even under the worst presidents, there's never been a coup, never a suggestion of one. We are loyal to the Constitution and the Commander-in-Chief as long as he obeys the Constitution. And I do.
You know what I'm saying here, right? You understand.
I do. But I'm saying, you know, the military is the one institution we must preserve at all costs because they will see us through the terrible times.
We have allowed these people in Washington to politicize it, and guys that gave their lives for these cities deserve better than what they have gotten here.
Of course they do, but the U.S. Army will outlast this president.
All right, Colonel, thank you so much. Coming up, left-wing liberals ratcheting up their rhetoric about ISIS. Can you trust them? I don't trust them. Now, they've cried wolf before. We have the tape to prove it. We'll check in with Charles Krauthammer next with his analysis, and later, new reports how Islamic extremists are being radicalized right here on U.S. soil and under Obama's watch as we continue.